Yeah, so my work actually spans between New Guinea, new media, and I also work in that exotic locale known as Kansas, um, where I try to implement new models for education. So first I'm going to start off in New Guinea, though, and I'm just going to take you in. This is where I work. I fly into the center of the island to this airstrip here, and then I walk for a couple days, and I end up in villages like this. And these are villages that are really off the grid, no electricity, no water, certainly no internet. And they grow all their own food in gardens like this. They also raise pigs. And they're also very opportunistic foragers. So now and then, after a big rain, the rain will wash down a spider web, and they'll be able to grab the spiders and the eggs, and they'll eat those. Every once in a while, they'll get lucky and capture a snake, and they'll eat a snake. And this particular snake is actually sort of the beginning of my research. And it seems like a crazy way to start off this story, but this snake was actually found about 100 feet from where I was staying when I first arrived. So I walk into this village. I don't speak the language. I went just by myself as, just trying to throw myself out there. And I was staying in this house right over here. And I'll take you inside the house so you can see what it looks like. These are actually my legs up here. And we found this snake like 100 feet away, and we brought it in. We had a great meal of it. But I was still pretty terrified of the place, and I was going through culture shock and all that kind of stuff. And so you can see my sleeping bag here. I used to, in the middle of the night, I'd wrap myself up in the sleeping bag as tight as I could to avoid the 5-pound rats like Chris has discovered, and also various bugs and stuff. But it's the tropics, and it's hot, and you're right by the fire, so inevitably the sleeping bag would come off of me, and I'd be exposed to the world, and there'd be bugs crawling on me. I'd brush them off and wrap myself up again. But on this day, the very day that we found this snake, I'm looking around thinking, gosh, a snake could crawl in here any time. This isn't exactly an airtight house. And sure enough, in the middle of that very night after we ate the snake, I woke up in the middle of the night, and there's this thing across me that's this big around, just right across my chest like this. And so I freak out, obviously, and and I grab it with my left hand, and I throw it off of me. But as I throw it, I roll with it, and it's completely dark. I can't see what's happening, but clearly I'm wrapped up with this thing somehow. But I get it pinned down with my left hand, and then I try to move my right arm so I can pin it down with my right arm, and I can't move my right arm. And it's about this time I realize I've actually pinned down my own right arm like this. And what had happened was my arm had fallen asleep, and then it just was across me like this, and so there actually was no snake, and so then I had to explain with hand gestures and things, because I didn't speak the language, what was going on. And for the next couple months, I'd walk around these villages, and I'd just hear, I didn't understand the language, so it'd be like blah, 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 and I'd see these arm gestures and then laughter. And this sounds really funny, but it was actually devastating. And I realized I had to recreate myself, recreate my identity. The worst form of culture shock is actually you realize that you don't have a self anymore. You don't really have an identity because you just can't communicate who you are to these people. And I realized I had to recreate myself. And in the process of recreating myself over the years that I lived there, it was I was doing it in a totally different way than the way I'd created myself in high school. I grew up in a very mediated world, a very media-saturated world, and this is a world with no media. And it really made me think about how different it is to shape your identity in a world based entirely around face-to-face relationships versus a mediated world. And then over the last 10 years that I've been going back and forth there, something else happened, and that was the introduction of writing in the form of maps, censuses, law books, and Bibles. And this had tremendous effects on the culture, far beyond what I could have ever predicted had somebody told me writing was just around the corner for them. And this made me think that media are not just tools, they're not just means of communication, but media actually mediate relationships. And so when media change, relationships change. And that brings up some interesting implications for where we are at here in our society with new media coming in all the time. So I'll tell you the story of how I got started here. So when I got back from New Guinea, I started looking into new media in the US and globally. And I'll tell you a story about this. This is the $1 million story. So $1 million is what it costs to produce a commercial for the Super Bowl. Just a 30-second spot for the Super Bowl cost $1 million. So Doritos had this great idea. They were just going to leverage this new media environment, this user-generated environment, to just ask their customers to produce a commercial for them. And then they would vote on the best one, and the best one would be aired on the Super Bowl. And it was a great success. This is a screenshot from one of the winning video. And they asked the 2 young guys who did this, these are just amateur filmmakers, they asked them, how much did it cost you to produce this video? And they said $12.79, which is roughly the cost of 3 bags of Doritos that they had to break during the filming. And that's a pretty good savings. It's roughly $1 million in savings. I don't have the exact math, but the USA Today did a study on it and found that it was the 4th most successful video commercial that year, so it did really well. But it ended up costing, it's $2.6 million just to get it on the air. That's what it cost for 30 seconds of airtime during the Super Bowl. So if you're doing the math, that's roughly $2.6 million. And they asked them why you would do that, and they said, well, it's all about water cooler talk. And they said, especially today with the internet, you want people chatting on the internet about your product. You don't want them talking about the game, you want them talking about your product, that crazy commercial they saw. Well, it turns out the day after the Super Bowl, the most popular video on the web, the most talked about video on the web, cost $0 to produce and distribute. And I know this because it was actually a video I produced. And it's this video here. It's a very geeky video that is sort of my first attempt at explaining the impact of new technology on our society. And what it is it sort of documents the change in text as it moves from paper to the digital world. And I'm going to speed it up here a bit because you don't want to watch the whole geeky thing, but it is like what it does is it analyzes behind the scenes of the web. It looks at the difference between HTML and XML and the coming of XML and how it unleashed blogs and wikis and YouTube and Flickr and all these different things, and that ultimately all of these things add up to a very important change, that the web is no longer about linking people or information, but it's about linking people. And I concluded that we would have to rethink a number of things, as you'll see here in the conclusion of the video.